Are you planning for retirement, deciding which income streams make the most sense for you? Whether you should focus on growth or protection, or have you even considered whether or not a tax free option might be the way to go? I'm Dre Griggs, founder of Obsidian Wisdom. I focus on people 5 to 10 years for retirement, put plans together so that they can make sound financial decisions where they can worry less about money and focus more on the wisdom so that the next chapter can be their best chapter. If you're trying to answer that very important question, do I have enough money for retirement? Then let me ask you the question, have you considered tax free retirement options? And the reason I even say that is because ultimately, when we're deciding how much money I need for retirement, I'm trying to figure out how much money I actually get to keep in my pocket. How much do I get to spend on my retirement, on my groceries and my light bills and the traveling and the adventures and the donations? How much money is actually in my checking account? And when you focus on tax-free retirement options, well, that money that's in the account is the amount of money that you get to keep in your pocket. When the money is in our 401k, we have to consider, for example, whether we're taking the money out before 59 and a half. Because if we are, we have a penalty. We have to consider how it's going to be taxed, which is as ordinary income. So we need to also subtract that as well. But when you build a retirement plan with tax-free options, the money that's in there is the money that you get to spend. So today we'll talk about 5 tax-free investments that you can use to build a retirement income where you're able to keep more of your hard-earned money in your pocket when you want to spend it the most. Now, if you're trying to determine whether or not a tax-free retirement makes sense for you, for a lot of people, the first thing that we'll think about is our current taxes to our future taxes. If you're investing the money to build a tax-free income in retirement, then that means you're taking taxes today. And if we're taking taxes today, it generally means that we believe we're going to have higher taxes in the future. If that is not the main focus that we have for building tax-free income in retirement, the second most common reason that I see people who gravitate towards this option, they're generally a little bit more risk averse. So if you have tax-free investments, that is one of the benefits that they're offering. And because they're offering you that as one of your benefits, they generally aren't focused as much on the growth. Where if you have a part of investment choices and you have the ones that focus on growth and they may have a little bit more risk, you have the ones that are focused a little bit more on protection, but they don't have that much growth. Well, the tax-free investments are going to be a little bit closer to that end because they're saying, hey, we're going to give you a tax-free growth where you have a municipal bond, which we'll go into a little bit more, or you have a tax-free retirement account, which you access through life insurance. These type of investments are very risk averse. They are generally going to be barely keeping up with inflation. But the idea is if I take my growth and then I add the fact that I don't pay taxes, maybe that makes the growth closer to an investment that I have this large growth and then I have to subtract the taxes. And we'll go into an example of how you can calculate that from a mathematical perspective to decide whether or not that makes the most sense for you. The third thing that you'll want to consider whether or not a tax-free retirement account makes the most sense for you is some of these are going to have income limits. Where if you make over a certain amount, Uncle Sam's not invested in making sure you don't pay taxes. Uncle Sam wants the tax-free investments to be focused on the people that maybe need a little bit more income, or they're a little bit more concerned about whether or not they will have an actual retirement where they don't run out of money. Because naturally, Uncle Sam is invested in you not running out of money because if you can't afford your retirement, then who's going to pick up the bill, right? You're going to be living on Social Security, and the Social Security website literally will tell you, please do not plan your retirement where all of your income is from Social Security. Please do not plan your retirement where the majority of your income is funded by Social Security. You need to plan your retirement where Social Security is funding 20 to 30% of your income. Where Uncle Sam's like, hey, if you're investing in your retirement, we're so excited by that we won't even tax your retirement income in the future. And so we'll talk about some of those limits and how it impacts you making decisions about building a tax-free retirement account as well. When you're talking about the benefits of having tax-free retirement options, the first one, of course, is the one we've been talking about is I don't have to pay taxes on the money. If I don't have to pay taxes on my money, I just feel good about that. I just smile even saying that to you. I don't have to pay taxes on my money. It just makes me smile. So that would be the number one benefit that we're all looking for. The second one that we don't talk about as much, but it's definitely tied to it, is you don't have required minimum distributions tied to your tax-free investment options. And the reason is because you've already paid taxes on it once. And because you already paid taxes on it once, Uncle Sam is not stressed about requiring you to take the money out so you pay taxes in your retirement. If you have the money in a pre-tax account like your 401k, your 403b, your TSA account, that Uncle Sam is sitting there waiting to collect tax revenue. And because he's been waiting to collect tax revenue, he is going to add these required minimum distributions after 73. And those amounts get larger and larger and larger the older and older that we get. And that could push you into a higher tax bracket. That could also have you taking out money that you have no intention of spending because you're doing this to avoid the 25% penalty. Because Uncle Sam doesn't want you to pass that money on to the next generation without it being taxed at least once, it can sometimes take away the flexibility that I really enjoy us having in retirement, where if I feel like doing something, I can, and if I don't feel like doing something, I don't have to. If Uncle Sam is the one that's driving a lot of our retirement income decisions, I find that a lot of people either didn't plan for or they're very annoyed by in retirement. Another benefit of having tax-free options in a retirement plan is it creates another income stream where it's not tied to the market, where you have a little bit more liquidity, where if the stock market is going down and I have a tax-free retirement account, for example, through my insurance company, well, that is not tied to the market in general. So if I'm able to take that income stream, I'm able to use that while I wait for the market to recover, just an additional income stream. We also find that the just general liquidity, as far as if my money is in real estate versus if my money is sitting in a tax-free retirement account, generally speaking, your tax-free retirement account is going to be a little bit more liquid. You can access it a little bit quicker. Depending on which tax-free investments that we use, I only have to pay an early withdrawal penalty, where if I take the money out before 59 and a half. And so now that we set the table, let's talk about the 5 tax-free options that you can have when you're building a retirement plan where you don't want to pay taxes in retirement. The first one we'll start with is municipal bonds. So think municipality, so think city. If my city, if my state is offering any sort of incentive to help them build roads and bridges and different things, that ultimately ends up being money that they will incentivize me to take because the government is not going to offer you as high of a return. The government is not in the business of paying people out 10, 20, 30% returns on their investment. The government sees itself as a safe investment. And so the idea is if everything hits the fan, then I'm able to put my money in government projects because what's the chance of the number one economy in the world going under, right? Like that's the idea. But because the return is so low, you'll see that your state will say, I won't tax you on any of the income you receive when you invest in city and state projects because you're helping us. So if you're helping us, we don't want to penalize you for helping us. So we will take the tax revenue from everyone else that didn't give us the money, but we won't take it from you for helping us to build that bridge that now has that toll. Generally speaking, depending on the type of project that the city is doing, there are some that it's very safe, where the literal project itself is going to generate money and you get paid from that money. There are some where the government is just doing things and you just trust that the government's going to be there. But high level, municipal bonds give me the ability to help the government, right? A bond means debt. So municipal bond gives me the ability to help the government and then I get tax-free income. Now, this is one of the ones where we talked about the risk is my return is barely keeping up with inflation. And because it's barely keeping up with inflation, that means I need to have some other portion of my investment that is focusing on growth. You guys know I'm a big fan of the 3 bucket strategy. So this bucket of municipal bonds would fall into bucket number 2, where I'm barely keeping up with inflation. It's generating income for me. It's not bucket number 3 that's focused on growth. It's not bucket number 1 where I have 1 to 2 years of living expenses in an investment that's basically cash or cash equivalent. And so I'm going to set this in bucket number 2, and then I'll have a portion of my income that's generated from that. Our second common tax-free account is going to be your Roth account. And when I talk about my Roth, I also lump in a backdoor Roth into the same bucket. But first, let's talk about just the Roth by itself. So the Roth by itself is something that has income limits, where I have to make under a certain amount of money. Otherwise, I won't even be able to place the money inside of it. But as long as I'm able to qualify for this, then I can place up to $7,000 inside of the account. If I'm 50 or older, I can add another $1,000, so I could put $8,000 inside of the account. And it's probably worth mentioning when you're talking about your traditional IRA and your Roth IRA, that they have a combined limit. And so what I'm saying is you can put $7,000 in one of the accounts, then you can only put $0 in the other account. If you put $3,500 inside of your traditional IRA, then you can only put $3,500 inside of your Roth IRA. You cannot put $7,000 in your traditional IRA and then $7,000 in your Roth IRA, that they are combined. So you just probably need to keep that in mind when you're making this plan. But because you can only put $7,000 or $8,000 inside of your Roth IRA, you can see why that might not be enough money for me to fund my retirement. And that's why I have to have some money that's invested in other assets as well. But inside your Roth IRA, you can be as aggressive as you want. And I see a lot of people that like to focus on income that would have been taxed outside of their Roth, but because it's inside of the Roth bucket, it is now tax-free income. So I like to see people that are not necessarily investing in a municipal bond inside of a Roth because it's already tax-free. So I don't need to sacrifice the growth to invest in another tax-free instrument. The tax-freeness is decided based on the wrapper. So the investment is in the wrong. As long as I can invest in it, so whether that's like real estate, stock market, different things, then that money is going to come to me tax-free. I don't have to choose tax-free investments inside of my Roth. But as I mentioned, because it only has a limit of $7,000 or $8,000, then this is going to be a part of someone's retirement plan as long as you're under the limit. In 2025, the income limits are currently set at $150,000 for an individual and $236,000 for a couple. So if you make $170,000 as an individual, then you won't qualify for a Roth account. If you made $300,000 as a couple, then again, you wouldn't qualify for the Roth account. That leads us into the second option, which is backdoor Roths, which is a very fancy way of saying I take the money inside of my pre-tax account, such as my 401k, and I convert that into a Roth. And so when I do that option, that is why it's called a backdoor Roth, because the front door is closed. They said, hey, you make over 150, you make over 236, the door is closed. You're not allowed to use a Roth account. But the back door is I place the money inside of a 401k and then I convert it into a Roth. So if I had $150,000 inside of my 401k, and then I claim that as income, so I converted that into a Roth, I then pay the taxes on $150,000 this year, but I now have a Roth account. So now I have $150,000 that is sitting in a tax-free vehicle that can fund my retirement. And now I don't have to worry about the RMDs on my 401k because I already converted it, already paid the taxes today. I don't have to worry about the income limits at the front door because I walked through the back door. And so if you focus on backdoor Roths, that now opens up the ability to have all of your income tax-free in retirement. We get to put a plan together where you start at 50 and from 50 to 65, you convert a portion of your 401k account into a Roth account. You pay the taxes each year, so you spread it out. You don't have the RMDs now to worry about at 73, and you have all this tax-free income in retirement. That is an option that a lot of people do enjoy because Uncle Sam is incentivizing you right now, at least, because he needs money today. You already know that we're close to $40 trillion in debt, and the number just keeps growing. And everybody keeps saying like they don't know over the past 25 years that it's not true. But everybody keeps saying that if I cut the taxes, if I do deficit spending, it's ultimately going to stimulate the economy in such a way that I'll generate more revenue than I lost. But we have 25 years of data. Now, the last time we had a balanced budget was in the late 90s, and we have been cutting taxes since then and deficit spending, and we have been unable to balance the budget since then. That is not even a discussion point anymore of presenting a balanced budget to Congress because unfortunately the average American does not require that to get their vote. Now, me, I do require a balanced budget for someone to have my vote. Now, I'm not saying you can wave a magic wand and do it overnight, but I am saying that you should at least have a plan together where you are strategically lowering the deficit, that we're not deficit spending. But until the Americans as a whole realize that inflation is basically a people's tax, it's lowering the value of your money because there's so much out there. The idea that a Honda Civic is relatively cheap because there's an infinite number of them versus a Lamborghini where maybe they make 10 of them. But even my book that Seth wrote called Margin of Safety, he stopped publishing it. And the book literally is on Amazon right now for $2,000. Would the book be $2,000 if it was just available to be published? Of course not. It would be like $20 like any other book. But because the book is no longer being published, then now there's a set number. And the only way that you can get that book is to buy it from someone else. And so as a result, now the book is $1,000, $2,000 to purchase. I think you go on, but I think you get the idea that there's an abundance of something that it's generally worth less because I can get it anytime. But if there is a small amount of something, then I start getting FOMO. I'm worried I'm going to miss out on the opportunity, right? Like tickets to a Taylor Swift or a Beyonce concert or the Super Bowl or the World Series. It's not that people necessarily want to pay that much for a ticket, is that we know that there's only so many seats and I can't add more seats to the stadium. So the only way to get a ticket is to buy one from someone who already has one. And as a result, I end up paying a lot more for those tickets. And so in my opinion, if we focus on balancing the budget, then a lot of the people that are risk averse, they could just keep their money in cash because their money would be worth so much. But because the money is not worth as much, you have to invest it. We have to invest in something that at least keeps up with inflation and outpaces inflation. That we don't have the option to leave the money in a mattress or a checking account or a savings account in the current economic environment. And I'm here for you, but I do think that that's a little messed up, right? The idea that my money is going to be losing value, so I have to invest it in real estate. That my money is going to be losing value, so I have to invest it in a business. So my money is going to be losing value, so I have to invest it in the stock market. Otherwise, I won't be able to retire without running out of money, right? And so that's me, right? Because I'm in this every day and because I have the conversations with you all, right? That's just me. Well, I'll get off my soapbox and stop my rant. And I appreciate you for not clicking off the video while I was going on about this. And separate from the Roth IRA and even the backdoor Roth IRA, we'll then talk about your Roth 401k. So depending on the company and how they structured it, you may have the option to put the money inside of a traditional side of your 401k or the Roth side of your 401k. And if you get to access the Roth side, you have the contribution limits a little bit larger, where it may have only been $7,000 or $8,000 inside of your regular Roth or your traditional IRA, and it is 23,500 inside of your traditional or your Roth 401k, which then means that it might be possible for me to fund my retirement just with my Roth 401k. Then if I can put $25,000 in there every single year, and then my employer can give the match at whatever the amount is, that I have the ability to have a significant amount of money inside of tax-free. Now, it's probably worth noting that you'll still probably pay taxes on the amount that your employer contributed to your 401k because you didn't pay the taxes on that. They got the tax deduction for giving it to you. So the Uncle Sam said, well, somebody has to pay me taxes on this. And that most likely will be you when you take the money out. And then you'll see whatever that percentage is. It's called like your cost base. This is the fancy way of talking about it. But it just means how much money did you put in that you pay taxes on? And how much money did someone else put in that you did not pay taxes on? And then that percentage or that amount, you'll normally just pay the taxes on that, which will still be significantly lower. But it is probably just so you don't have sticker shock. We're like, well, wait a minute. Dre told me I'm going to put the money in my Roth 401k, I wouldn't pay taxes on it. The investments that you put in there are your tax-free income. And then you do have a higher limit. And so that's very nice as well. You also have the ability to invest in it any way that you like. So you could invest it in the moderate way, or you can invest it in an aggressive way. And then you can focus on the growth bucket, which is bucket number 3, or you can focus on the income bucket and have like bonds and different things in there. And that'll be bucket number 2. But you probably wouldn't have it invested in cash, right? Like you just probably have cash to cash. But of course you can. It's always your choice. Depends on your risk appetite and things like that. Another reason that people like the Roth 401k is you don't have those income limits that we were talking about inside of your traditional Roth, where I have to make below 150,000 as an individual or $236,000 as a couple. Your Roth does not have those limits. It's just like your normal 401k. If I work somewhere and it's offered by the employer, I can place money inside of there. The only limits end up being how much money you make. You can't place more than what you make. But if you made $24,000 in a year, then you could put $24,000 inside of your Roth 401k. If you only make $10,000 in a year, then you can only put $10,000 inside of your Roth 401k. And the reason Uncle Sam normally has the cap at whatever you actually made from earned income is because Uncle Sam doesn't want you just to use it as a tax shelter. Uncle Sam wants to incentivize you to invest your earned income for your retirement. As long as there's earned income, no matter what the amount is, you can contribute up to the limits of that instrument. So you can contribute up to 23,500, or you can contribute an additional 7,500 if you're over 50. And if you're 60 to 63, you have the super catch-up contribution, where I believe you can contribute an additional 11,250 towards your retirement account. Now, the super catch-up contribution normally depends on how your employer is structured that 401k, because it's not something that's in every plan. And it's just as a heads up, it was a more recent law passed, so you'll want to check to see if your employer even offers that. But if they do, you can contribute up to that additional amount. Your fourth tax-free retirement account is a health savings account. And I talk about this one a lot because it's very unique in the sense that it helps us with a lot of problems. So people are trying to figure out, hey, will I run out of money in retirement? One of the things that they're thinking about is rising healthcare costs. And if we're thinking about rising healthcare costs, the health savings account is a great investment. It does require your employer to offer it and for you to have a high deductible insurance plan. As long as you have a high deductible health insurance plan, you have access to a health savings account. And inside your health savings account, some of the cool things is it's considered the triple tax benefit. And what we're saying is when you invest the money in that account, it goes in tax deductible. So it doesn't count as income today. So you don't have to claim it as income today. but then it grows tax deferred, which means that each year that the money grows, you don't actually have to claim the growth as income either. So you don't have to pay taxes each year of growth. And you can invest it how you would like inside of this instrument. And then you get to take the money out tax free as long as you use it on healthcare expenses, which, as you can imagine, means I did not pay taxes on the money at any point throughout my retirement and life journey, which is pretty cool. And the reason Uncle Sam does that is because Uncle Sam knows that healthcare expenses are going up. And Uncle Sam knows that healthcare expenses is probably going to be a huge part of your retirement. And if you're unable to cover that, then it brings us back to that original problem where the majority of your retirement is now being funded from government programs. And Uncle Sam would like to incentivize people to invest in the things that are likely going to disrupt their retirement. And because healthcare expenses, I think Fidelia did a study where it said on average, people will spend somewhere around $150,000, $200,000 as an individual. And then as a couple, you'll spend about $350,000 to $400,000 on healthcare over the life of your retirement. And then you add on to that 7 out of 10 people, 65 and older, will have at least one long-term care episode. And that cost ends up being $60,000 a year on average. And on average, it's about 3 years. So then we're saying, okay, that means that healthcare could end up being $200,000 to $500,000 as far as the amount of money that someone has to have set aside to be able to cover that. And so then it leaves you with a couple options. You either invest, so you have the retirement savings, again, a portion for healthcare expenses, or you can get insurance where maybe you take the long-term care and then you cover a portion of that. You get a Medigap plan to go with your Medicare, so it limits your co-insurance and your out-of-pocket expenses. And you're starting to put these pieces together to try to figure out how you'll fund your retirement. And so you either will split some of the risk where you have some of it covered by these other institutions, or you have to have the money set aside in your own account. Because that is a reality of most people's retirement, Uncle Sam would love for people to invest for their health expenses. And he said, I will tax you at any point in your retirement. And when that happens, you really got to think, why would Uncle Sam do something so wonderful for me? And that sort of lets you know how Uncle Sam sees your healthcare expenses as far as covering your future retirement expenses. And so that's why I do enjoy the health savings account. The money is tax free and it's not taxed at any point in your retirement, which means it's the money that you earn and that's how much you get to keep, which is a pretty nice deal if you ask me. And our fifth and final tax-free retirement account is tax-free retirement account. I know, right? Because it's like I said the same thing and I totally get it. They've sort of renamed it, but these are the ones that you get through the insurance company. So if you've ever seen someone with whole life insurance and then they have what's considered a tax-free retirement account in there, all that we're talking about is the cash value inside the policy. You're technically going to get like a universal index life and different things where there is a portion of cash value that's growing in these instruments. And that portion of cash value can be used as tax-free retirement income because that portion is generally growing tax-free. Now, when you think about a tax-free retirement account, naturally some of the benefits is it's very liquid. I can cash this money out anytime I want. I don't have to qualify for a loan or anything like that. It's my money, it's in the account. I may have to pay back a loan depending on whether I borrowed the money from it or I took the money out. I don't have the 59.5 early penalty, and so I can take the money out as well whenever I'm ready. The risk is this account is most likely going to be invested in high grade index bonds where you're basically going to get like 2 to 3% is not going to give you as much of a return. And the way corporate bond interest rates work is very similar to the way you and I's interest rates work. That if we have great credit, we expect to have very low interest rates. That if we have bad credit, we expect to have very high interest rates or to be declined altogether. And inside of corporate bonds, it's the same idea. That if you are a high investment grade and you have great credit, your business is always paying its bills on time, you have lots of cash flow available, then you would expect to be charged a very low interest rate. And they are. But if I'm in penny stocks and very risky investments that they call like subprime, like that means below, like submarine rate below. So below prime, and prime is normally like an excellent credit score. So let's say prime is like 700 for an individual. Well, for a business, that would be the same idea that if you're a business with a 700 credit score, then I would be expecting someone subprime to have like a 10, 20% interest rate, which you can then say, oh, wow, that is a high yield bond, which is what they say. But back in the day, they used to be called junk bonds. They renamed them, unfortunately, so that people are unaware that this is junk in most situations. They named them high yield, which is true, They have a much higher interest rate that they're going to be charged and willing to pay you. But the issue is the probability of you getting paid, right? And so I won't go into all the math and bore you. But the idea is that if I can get a return that has a 100% chance of happening versus a return that has a 25% chance of happening, I should weigh the one that has a 100% chance of happening higher. Then I should weigh the one that has a lower percentage chance of happening lower, even if the one that has a lower percentage chance of happening is a higher return. And so we're just measuring that. But again, I won't bore you with all the math, but it's just something to really be thinking about. That, yeah, someone's like, yeah, I'll give you 15% return, but there's a 25% probability of having a 15% return, or I can get a 7% return, and there's a 99% probability of it happening. We should probably choose a 7% return. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But of course, everybody's a little bit different, so I can't just give a blanket statement and then they'll be like, Dre, you gave financial advice. I did not. I'm just simply speaking in general. That is how I would look at that situation. So when you're looking at the cash value inside of these insurance instruments, another con is going to be the cost of maintaining these. So if you compare whole life insurance to term insurance, whole life insurance is generally 10 times more expensive. It's because there's a higher probability of you getting paid out, right? Like it's literally, as long as you make the premium payment, someone is going to get that amount of money at the end of the day. So the insurance company is compensating themselves for that risk, which you and I expect, right? Who gets the risk gets more reward. But they also have the account maintenance fees in there. They have the commissions in there. They have the investment choice people in there. Like there's a lot of fees inside of the whole life insurance. But as long as you're able to hold on to this plan for a pretty long time, where you pay all the fees early, think of it almost like a mortgage, where early in your mortgage, you make your payment and your principal does not go down that much. That's sort of the idea of those insurance instruments where you're making the payment and your cash value does not go up that much. But in the future, once you paid all these fees, which is what they are, just like your mortgage, once you paid all those fees, just like your car when you first got it, once you paid all those fees, you start seeing that the money is working more efficiently. And that's the same thing with these insurance products. Whether or not the agent tells you that, I don't know, right? They put illustrations together that makes it seem like it's going to have cash in 5 years. I would highly doubt that. But is it possible to have cash in 25 years? Yeah, that one's probable and is very more likely. It's just not as sexy of a sale as you would imagine. But you would be paying those fees early on, and then you won't have as much cash value. You'll look in 10 years and you basically will have nothing showing for that. And that is sometimes what we have to consider in the cost, where I could have invested this in another investment, gotten an 8% return. And if you even subtract the taxes from that, I might have more money than just having this tax-free instrument, but it's tied to this insurance product that has all these fees that I'm paying in the early going. Now, some people will say, well, in the insurance, you also have the leverage where you're putting in a little bit of money over a long period of time, and that's your premium, but you immediately get access to $1 million, right? Like if that's what your insurance policy is. And that is true that if something was to happen to you on day one, maybe you paid $1,000 into that policy, and then your loved ones can get 500,000 to $1 million. Like that is a true statement. But when we're talking about the other half of it, which is if nothing happens to you and you've invested in this insurance policy for 25 years, and then you have the cash value that is the equivalent of maybe just 5 years of investing outside of that, that it is true that that is a big opportunity cost. And you just have to weigh it to decide which one makes the most sense for you in your overall retirement. So hopefully what you notice when you're choosing the financial vehicles that you want to build your retirement on, each one has pros and cons. And if I'm focusing on tax-free investments, there might be limits on how much I can put in. There might be limits on how much I can make. There might be limits on how I can invest it and the growth that I can have. But normally if I can put a plan together where I can have a variety of investment choices, I can normally start putting together something where I have a portion that is my tax-free income that doesn't have a lot of risk tied to it. And that's normally going to be my municipal bonds or my tax-free retirement accounts that I don't really have the ability to get a high return on those, but I do get tax-free money and it's probably keeping up with inflation. Very close, but it's probably going to keep up with inflation. But then I have my Roth account where I have the limits where I can only do $7,000 or $8,000, and that's probably not going to be enough for me to fund my retirement by itself. But then you have your Roth 401ks or your backdoor Roths, or you can even have your health savings account where I don't have those limits. I can invest those very aggressively if I so choose. And I don't have as much of an issue on how much I can place in those accounts on any given year. And so as a result, I can fund a large part, if not all of my retirement following these strategies. And then it really just comes down to how much do I prioritize tax-free income in retirement, and what do I feel about my taxes today versus my taxes in the future? Am I paying a lot of taxes today to have tax-free income in the future? And I think taxes would have been lower for me in the future. Well, then that's a little bit of a dicey decision. We'd have to really think about that. But do I think that my taxes are lower today at historical lows? And in the future, I'm plan on having a whole bunch of money because I'm going to be successful in crushing it, and the government's probably going to raise taxes. If I feel that way, then that just makes sense for everyone. That yeah, I should pay as much as I can today, unless I need the cash flow today to pay my bills, and then in retirement I have this tax-free income. There's a lot of choices that go into that, and that's why if you're someone who the wheels are starting to turn and you just want to be able to have a couple of your questions answered, I do want to invite you every single Wednesday. I do a live workshop and I go through the 5 hidden risks to a wealthy retirement in 3 frameworks that I use with my clients to make sure that they do not have those fears at all. If that makes sense for you, I'll put a link in the show notes, and then all you got to do is really go to obsidianwisdom.com, click on I want a worry-free retirement. You can sign up, and then I will see you at the next event. As always, I'm thankful for your time. You could have been anywhere, and you chose to be here with me. If you found value in this video, like and subscribe so you can continue receiving valuable insights on how to build your own wealthy retirement system. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.